Hi there, Scapers, and welcome to another jam-packed RuneScape live stream. You may remember we mentioned last week there were some unanswered topics on the Lee's Q&A, and plenty of those were combat, and this is what we saved them for. We got a killer cast today, as we're joined by some of the Combat Council to talk combat and answer some of the biggest topics in the community right now. Just before we get started, I want to steal the spotlight for a second. Sorry, everybody. Just say a quick note on our news posts. We just wanted to let you know that things are already in motion to improve the way we work with news posts in a remote working world. It's clear that our current process and checks, while they've mostly worked so far, coming off a break and things moving really fast, there was obviously flaws where things got missed, and we didn't do a good enough job of capturing every change in development. We got to do better and make sure that that info that we're getting to you is always accurate, and we're putting in plans in motion already to better protect against it. Obviously, the proof is in the pudding, but just know we're on it. And also, we're going to up our commitment to the level of detail in the news post. We've been a little bit short sometimes. We have to think about keeping things digestible. We talk to a wide variety of people. But really, that should never be at the expense of any availability of detail. So just know we're on that too. We're working on that and a commitment. And, next week's news post, hopefully you'll see that reflected. It's a labor of love across a lot of teams, our news posts. And everyone wants them to be awesome, accurate, full of detail, and be what you want and what you deserve. So just know we're on it. Just want to steal the spotlight before we go into all the awesome combat stuff, and just kind of give you a little apology and just let you know that we'll do better. Right, with all that said, on to the exciting stuff you joined us for, and I think it's time we move on to introducing everybody. So please give a warm welcome to Mod Pie.
Hello, I'm Mod Pie. I make combat stuff and do engine work. Occasionally, I turn up at Christmas and give you some presents.
They were good this year too. A lot of people talking about them. Mod Ramen.
Yeah. Hey, Mod Ramen. I quite often work on combat updates, mostly bosses, but I do some cool stuff like Essence of Finality, and occasionally I'll make a Christmas quest here and there, but mostly combat.
And Mod Orion. Welcome to the stream. I think this is our first together, isn't it, Orion? I don't think we've been on stream together.
It's the first time we've been on together with both of our faces on at the same time.
Yes.
I think.
I think so, yeah. Because you were a still image for us once.
Yeah, that's right. Hi guys, I'm Mod Orion. Been working on RuneScape's combat stuff for 5.5 years now. Made elite dungeons, some abilities, various combat changes over the years.
Well, that's our cast for today. But for some people out there, we've got a ton of new players coming in from Steam. We have new players coming in all the time. People might not know what a combat council is, believe it or not, or have never heard from you before. So, do you guys just want to let everyone know what is the combat council? What's your mission on the team, and how does that work within something as huge and sprawling as RuneScape?
Do you want me to take that since I'm main?
Take it away, John.
I founded the combat council, right? We were the first council. So the point of the combat council is to not have decisions about the combat specifically, but we've got other councils all go through one person's head. Especially a game like RuneScape, it's wide, it's vast, and you need people from different points of view and different aspects in the game. So the Combat Council is literally that. It's a group of people that are interested in combat, but we're also coming from different places, so that when we want to make a change in the game, we can all come together and have a discussion and come at it from different points of view, so that when we do eventually come out with an answer, all things are considered. Best way to put it. We kind of meet every 2 weeks to discuss combat, and we prefer to focus on. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if anyone in the chat hasn't been exposed, now you know what the team does. And I think we can go straight into it, really. So we've got some questions that we gathered on Twitter and Facebook that you may have seen. Some amazing questions. Thank you, everybody. We're also going to talk about some of the biggest topics that we've seen discussed in general, so not necessarily like a specific question, but a collection that it represents. But before we do, I realized we haven't really caught up with all of you for quite some time to talk about 2020, and we obviously had quite a few combat-related or combat-impacting updates over the course of last year, so I just wanted to check in with you on them, get your thoughts, kind of talk through those a little bit. So obviously we started with War's Retreat, big PVM hub update. I think it's, safe to say it's now a core part of a lot of PVMers' experience day to day. Anything you want to talk about with that and how it's influenced on the combat, or anything over the past year that you want to kind of cover with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kick off on this one. I think War's Retreat is one of the best PVM updates we've done, especially for quality of life. If you think about like where it really came from, a lot of players, were somewhat discouraged from PVMing because the boss portal was locked behind like one of the harder wrecks in the game, getting a matscape, right? You had to get a matscape to be able to utilize the boss portal, and that just isn't right. Those two things shouldn't be connected. It's really, really hard to imagine RuneScape without the PVM hub. It's now where I always teleport to just bank. It's where I teleport to socialize, and a lot of other players sort of hang out there. Plus, it's opened up PVM for so many people. There is the awesome quality of life things that aren't just handed to the players. You have to sort of go through the boss kills, so it's not like, here, take all this nicety on the plate. But it's a place where like-minded people can gather, talk, find groups. We've seen people in worlds where they're like, can someone help me do ambassador? I've done the first two bosses, Taraket and Crassian Leviathan, but couldn't quite get through the ambassador, and we noticed someone who helped out, and it was sort of awesome to see. So yeah, it's hard to imagine RuneScape without it. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's what you see on every stream, and also even on the Rapture release, it's like center of attention, right? So speaking of other releases this year, we tweaked the Tier 92 cost and gain for kind of viability this year. What's our perception where that is right now after we've made those changes? What are our current thoughts on it?
So where are we now? We're about 8 months or so after that was released. Yeah, there were some major concerns about the new materials and such affecting previous bosses. Vorago was one of the big discussion points. We watched that very closely. We were looking at weekly updates to the economy and Vorago's economic throughput. Ultimately, everything remained somewhat balanced after a couple of stock market hits, as it were. These things happen every single time we release an update. There's a slight overreaction. Not from the players themselves, but to the market. So it's buy, sell, depending on the situation. As of now, there are a few tweaks that I would make to systems, but not the Tier 92 armors themselves. We're done there. Sure. The most common complaint that I get, or piece of feedback I really should say, on socials is my helmet just disintegrated, just degraded to dust, and I didn't notice. Or can we please make them degrade to a broken state? And that to me is a bigger question of what are we going to do about degrade to dust armors. So currently I can't think of anyone on the Combat Council that likes the degrade to dust system. And it is on our list of things to look at in the future. It's whether or not it is deemed important enough on the hierarchy for us to concentrate on. So that kind of thing we are so aware of and really want to fix. It just depends where it falls in priority.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. And obviously we talked about obviously the Tier 92 kind of tweaks, and then we also introduced the essence of finality, which is pretty much in everyone's rotation now. God, I wish I could afford multiple of them. Thoughts on where it's landed in the meta? How do you think it's kind of been kind of in kind of its introduction to the game, and where it's kind of affected combat?
Cool. I mean, this is another one I can pick up as the dev who made it, worked on it with Mod Orion and Mod Timbo as design. Super happy with where it's sitting. Pre-EOC, special attacks were so core to RuneScape combat, and to see a lot of these older special attacks make a comeback is awesome. When we were developing it, we knew that there were going to be the set of special attacks that were set at the top, right? We were like, players might, shove an SGB in. It's quite an expensive thing, but Dark Bow, Spec, Dragon Claws, Statius Warhammer, which we haven't seen too much stored in the EOF, but it's obviously raised a lot of thought about special attacks going forward, rebalancing older special attacks. But the rebalance is such a large job. But like, the core of your question is like, are we happy with how it sits in the meta? And absolutely. It's an awesome addition, and it's expensive. It's expensive to get. It's expensive to work towards. Like, if you're making it yourself, you've got to go through, the Reaper, and you've got to go get the Fortunate components, and it's a grind. And it looks pretty as well. Like, it looks good. So yeah, super happy where it's sitting in the meta. And it's definitely opened up and brought back a lot of loved special attacks.
Awesome. Well, I guess there's one last big thing to talk about when it comes to last year, and that's obviously Raksha. We did a stream just after launch that I know a lot of people enjoyed. How has he settled since then, since we last caught up on him? How are you seeing the kind of changes that happened to Raksha impact everything? Kind of what's just your general thoughts about kind of Raksha's position right now?
Touched in briefly with Orion just before the stream to see his thoughts on it. We're really happy with where Raksha's sitting as a boss, and to how many people are engaging with the boss. The changes we made the second week of launch brought a lot of players back in, and I know my friend circle absolutely adore Raksha, so happy with where it's sitting. It's always good to have a boss that is challenging, but once a lot of players judge content off their first like 1 or 2 kills, but once they sort of get it down, they learn the mechanics, they find okay, rinsing it is fun. But they got to keep their eye on the game, otherwise they might take a tail whip to the face.
Yeah, I'm still on my PVM journey to kind of one day get to take on Raksha. And one of the things I actually personally love about it is it's still fun to watch. I find it's a fun boss to actually watch, as hopefully it is to play. I wouldn't know, but I find it really interesting to watch, and especially someone who's aspiring to get to that level, it's kind of awesome. I think we can't really touch on. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, watching players strategize. However they're dealing with the pools, whether they're chinning them, whether they're switching to laceration boots and sort of jumping around. It's been awesome. Always a pleasure.
Well, I think the last thing we need to talk about, I don't think we can talk about Raksha and about combat in 2020 without touching on, obviously, the new codices, introduce the new abilities. Is this something that we're happy with? Is it something we're thinking about changing in the future? Like, how do we currently feel about things like greater ricochet, greater chain, etc.?
Saying we're happy with it is an interesting way of putting it. We are aware that the balancing is off with the codices. It is something we are actively talking about, looking at. Not even 40 minutes ago, we were sort of chatting about them. That's all we can really say. But we are aware, and we will tweak where necessary.
Perfect. Right, well, I think that's enough about 2020. Hopefully you all enjoyed a little journey back into last year. We didn't get a chance to talk about so many of this with you, so I figured it'd be a nice little kind of check-in. But now it's time for the big stuff. It's time to talk about where we are today. And so I think probably the best place to start is talking about how you feel about the balance of the combat triangle currently. And I think we can probably extend this to anything you want to say about the general state of combat, etc. I'll leave it to you on what you'd like to cover.
I suppose I'd
want to take this one, Pi? Yeah.
There you go. So, 2/3 happy. That's the best way to put it. So, I'm really happy with what we've done with melee and range recently. I feel like those styles have gone from like almost carbon copies, and they've of other styles, and now they have a lot of their core problems solved, and they have a lot more identity, like things like Greater Barge and a lot of the comboing. Like G-Rico's shown it quite a lot as well, like how many things that you can combo to get ECB procs and bolt procs. I feel that actually they're starting to get a really nice position in kind of how the gameplay feels, and it's not gone unnoticed from other people that we've kind of bumped them up. reason why I say 2/3 happy is because we're still not happy with where mage is. Like, it's the weakest style, and it doesn't have that nice feel. Like, I'm not going to include Fortic auto attacking because I'm sorry, but that isn't mage's niche, and that's not an intended niche for mage. And we can pick up Fortic auto attacking later. I think there's a question later on it, but I'd really love to see some love given to mage and give it that kind of feel, so that each of the three styles, like, they don't necessarily all have to be balanced. Like, I'm kind of fine with like other things kind of taking the limelight for a little bit, as long as it's for a little bit, right? I don't want it to be like mage was before we looked at melee and range. Like, mage was king for so long, and I wouldn't like to see that again. But I would like to see mage get some love, so that it does kind of get that kind of really good gameplay feel, how the other two have got, and obviously bump its damage to be a bit closer to the other two. Do you guys have any opinions?
Yeah, what we need to, like, if we look back, right, on the last 8 years, let's start with where 2013, when Catholic King was released. Drygores dominated for so long. It was like, RuneScape was Drygore-scape for the longest period. You saw people
we used to call the Drygore Mace the money maraca, didn't we? Because shake these at the bosses and they get money.
It dominated so long. Then Magic had its time in the limelight, and Magic dominated for the longest time. Magic was, used everywhere. And then this sort of melee sort of made a little, pull ahead of Magic. You discounting Fortic auto attacking, with Greater Barge, Bladed Dive, all the niceties that melee got, and now range is having its time in the sun. But it is a careful balancing game. It is, you don't want something to sort of dominate too long. But as John rightly said, happy with sort of where range is sitting, happy with where melee is sitting, and we got to go back and give Magic some love soon. So I'm sure she'll be next.
I really like that you said range is having its time in the sun. It's really poetic, but also I think you mean range is having its time in the death swiftness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming in with some quality content there.
I mean, so like, speaking of all that, I know I'm going to caveat this with, obviously we have plans, we have thoughts on what the year's going to look like, and things are always subject to change. But what are if we're talking like generalities, like what are your personal priorities for the Combat Council this year? Like, what are the things that you're kind of most top of mind to you when it comes to combat in 2021?
I'm happy to start here because we've discussed this and we put thought into it. Players have so much power, but not enough content to utilize that power. There are areas where Solak, Telos sort of scales upwards, and players are able to utilize that power. It's creating content that sort of can indefinitely scale upwards, and we're able to see player put that power they've got to the test, put the hybriding, the tribriding that they've learned through different methods in the game, and sort of testing that, and bringing the power we put out ahead of the power the player can output.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this quite some years ago at RuneFest. I think we called it the Telos principle at the time, which is a bit of a play on words.
Very nice.
But it's like where we and when I explain this, I always explain this kind of like, we should release an NPC that's really difficult on release, and then release rewards that answer the question that NPC is asking. So on release, this NPC is really, really strong, and it almost feels OP, but then we kind of release a piece of content which makes it a little bit easier and more accessible. But right now, what we've currently got is the player is so powerful that there's no more answers to give, and that will eventually become a problem, right? Because we're going to release something that's cool and flashy, but they're going to be like, well, but I don't need it. I just don't need it. We've always got the kind of the mentality of like, as a RuneScape player, I always want to be as efficient as possible, and I always want the best thing. But we shouldn't be relying on that. We should be designing on good principles, and we should be constantly getting players to answer questions. So in this instance, I think it's on us to kind of release some difficult stuff in the right places, mind, but to release some difficult stuff and start asking questions of the players again.
We have an almost self-fulfilling prophecy there. Whenever we release a new challenging boss, we have an expectation thrust upon us that we will also release respectively powerful rewards alongside it. So it's always a challenge for us to manage what the player expectations would be from a PVM release. For me, my Combat Council aspirations are twofold. As Mod Ramen stated, the power creep recently in the last 2 years has been beyond a level that I'm comfortable with personally. I think we went 2 years without a new PVM encounter, and yet had 3 or 4 large impactful power creep updates. So that was not necessarily the order in which we would have liked to have done things, but it's the order that it fell. And then the other part to the things that I'd like to achieve is something that I know we're all extremely keen on, but is not overly exciting, like from a marketing or publishing perspective. Oh, there's a new dinosaur boss, it's really cool. But is to just reinforce the system that we already have, to fix the things that need fixing, to balance the things that need balancing, is really important to keep on top of. It's something that I would say as a developer, and very candidly, that I don't think I am allowed enough time to do these kind of things. Before COVID struck, we had some infrastructure in place to allow us to do like game jams and such, and those were the times where PVM Hub appeared out of a game jam, and it was one of the best updates we've had in a very long time. So if we as developers, once everything goes a bit more back to normal, and we start hitting our development targets like consistently despite COVID, hopefully we'll be afforded a little bit more time to do both content releases and major quality of life fixes and such. Like Pi is a bit of a hero, Ramen's a bit of a hero. They do stuff in down days where they'll have 3 hours of meetings, but they'll have their code open and they're fixing some stuff, because that's the kind of time we get afforded to us at the moment. Unless Ninja, oh my god, Ninja are just like smashing it at the moment, and I'm really hoping that the upcoming updates in Q1 and Q2 will turn the tide a little bit in terms of reinforcing our existing systems. That's something I really want to see more of.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, go.
Sorry, I think yeah. For me, it's multiple things, but yeah, like echoing what you said, Orion, like I would like to address Mage, because I feel like I stood on stage at RuneFest telling you I'm going to replace Vortic auto attacking a lifetime ago, and it's not the question. It's not like we don't want to address it. It's more we don't have the time to address it. Like it would have been nice to address it with Raksha, for instance, but if you take into account that team's making an end game boss, pretty much. Which is already mentally taxing, plus all of the rewards. So he's got 4 rewards on that. You've got your boots plus 3 new abilities, and then you're asking them to fix the meta of one of our combat styles on top of that. Like that's you can't do that, right? So I'd like to fix that, but I'd also like to continue with accessibility improvements, getting more people into combat. I don't. Like the more people we can get into combat and enjoying it, like we saw it during the last week, we took away death costs, and so many more people got involved in combat and enjoyed it and saw the reason why people enjoyed combat. So I'd like to work on that as well, really, as well as producing new awesome bosses.
Oh god, yeah. This is the thing with us, right? Is because we're so passionate about the combat in this game and the encounter design and just dungeons, bosses, everything, man. It's so cool. Each of us has 10, 20, 30 different ideas. If let's say Mod Osborne or Mod Mick just went, hey, can you make a PVM? We'd be, yeah, we can make a PVM update, no problem. We can make 2, 3,
Which one
7.
Do you want this one or this one?
Yeah.
I'm working on these.
Yeah. Easy. Like, Oh man, it gets to the point where we're doing it in our spare time for fun sometimes. Like a lot of developers, a lot of programmers, a lot of game designers have things that they do outside of work, and often the things that we do outside of work are related to RuneScape. So yeah, we got projects on the go, even that are not in production. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's when it's more than a job, though, right? Like, and that's it. You know, like you said, ideally, as this all settles and this new like monthly release schedule settles, hopefully it'll be a more of a balance for what you're looking for. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think as well, it's probably cool for hopefully all of you watching, like, to get a little bit of insight of what changes we go through when we're all switching to remotely working together and trying to release content every month. That's awesome. I'll move on to another question I've got for you, but great stuff. What do you think about combat right now that's great and that you'd like to do more of? Like, what would you want to double down on? Again, we're talking ideals, we're not necessarily making commitments or anything, but like, what are you most enjoying about what you're doing with combat right now?
The recent push in narrative, like,
yeah,
you know, you look at the pieces of content that have been released in the last 5 years, they are so narratively driven. You know, Raksha, Elite Dungeons especially, like Elite Dungeons are just a masterpiece. You're playing through a story, and you're sort of captivated by that story, and as you go through, the VO is just epic, the music is epic, like that.
Yeah,
it's gotta be narrative.
I mean, yeah, I'm a spacebar warrior, right? I don't. if it's text, I don't read it, right? So I really, but I do care about lore, and I do find it interesting. I just don't want to read the text, and I think, especially since it's RuneScape, and this is important. The lore is important, and I think showing that narrative and telling that lore through gameplay rather than like books and like chat, I think is absolutely awesome. Yeah. Like, I definitely want to see more of it.
We were discussing this earlier, weren't we? Like, very much. We like to show, not tell, with games. I brought this up in the old Elite Dungeon streams back in the day, that we wanted to focus on diegetic storytelling and just show what's occurring on the player's screen without any text whatsoever. And whether that be environmental, or whether, you know, we were saying earlier, like, if the big bad guy comes along but you don't know he's the big bad guy, then we've done something wrong. So like, either he just looks like his character design is evil or strong or scary or imposing, or he just comes up and like punches you in the face, and it's like, okay, that's the bad guy, I don't like him, and then that's it. Like, the ambassador in the Curse of the Blackstone quest, like, before you go and kill him, assuming that you go and do the quest first like a madman, he like zaps all these like friendly pirates and just disintegrates them, and you're like, oh crap, like, he's a bad guy. And then now at that point you really know
he's also a strong bad guy, you know what I mean?
He's also a strong bad guy, yeah. And they're dead. So yeah, if you haven't done that quest, by the way, go do it. It's rewarding. Extra 10% damage reduction is tasty on the ambassador fight, wouldn't you say, Ramen?
Yeah.
Fun fact, I was one of those madmen who did it in story mode first. So here we go. I haven't got to do ambassador properly yet. I know, I went through the quest because I wanted to get my quest cape. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
No, but I like story mode as well, because it makes the story accessible. We should never lock out lore. You know, like,
I mean, that's the thing. Like,
I wouldn't do it, but
we discussed like being able to indefinitely scale upwards, right? That's a cool thing for a boss. But, like,
yeah, for me,
like, scale it down. So, you know, little old Timmy with his, you know, 90 strength can experience the story we have to tell. I don't know why he's got 90 strength. He's a noob, right? He's a noob. But he wants to play the content. Isn't so confident with combat. Is still able to sort of go in and face roll a toned down encounter.
I'm glad you at least said Timmy and not Huli. I'll take it. To be honest, yeah, totally. Like, what I liked about story mode as well, for me personally, was just I got to experience the content and kind of get a feel for what it was without actually having to have the gear and be already full blown commit. Because I think when I first went through it, I was nowhere near. I think I'd be nowhere near now, really, but I'm closer.
It actually works. It's like a pseudo practice mode, doesn't it? And that's awesome.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
as developers, we do actually want as many people to play our content as possible. So
Shocking,
has
I
a
know.
really important place in that.
We got some other big questions coming up, but what are the biggest challenges you see for combat right now? You may have already covered that, but it's something that I thought people might want to hear.
The servers.
Should I hide now?
The only thing I can even say on that is like we're working on it. Some changes are being made, but like it's a bigger
as
job
someone in
than
the
any
engine
of us
team, I
can
can
do.
tell you we are actively working on it. But it's
Yeah.
not a simple thing. You've got code that is 20 years old and 20 years of content all running at once, and up to 2,000 players on the server at once. It's going to take its toll, but we are actively working on it.
Just plug in more Ethernet cables. God.
Just download more RAM.
That's just a solution.
Yeah.
Bigger servers.
There have been. What would you say? There's been like 100 different optimizations in the code over the last like 2 years. We're working on it hard. Like some of those optimizations are small, some of them are huge, and there's even more coming. And we're getting emails about the engine work coming through, and they're really exciting. So we're not just sitting and laughing. We are working our asses off trying to figure it out.
There's also there's also the flip flop of like we are sort of game devs. It's not you could say if we're optimizing script, it's a little bit in our realm, but it's also just not in our realm. Like I want to make a tree smash you up. Like I don't know what to do with.
We can't just speed up the tick rate as well. So this is interesting in the when you say speed up the tick rate, you don't realize the amount of gameplay design questions that also throws up. It's not just that. I mean, if we sped up the tick rate, it will get more laggy for starters. If it can't cope with 0.6 second tick rate, it's not going to cope with a faster one.
More cycle drift.
Gameplay-wise, for instance, you've now got, if you think about it in a timeline, you can now interleave actions in between other actions. So you've now got a new, like your boss can respond to you faster now, for instance. So you've also got like a design consideration on top of that. But I'm not going to go too deep into fast tick because otherwise that'll be our hour. There's other things as well. Slow down the tick rates. Do it 1 minute tick rate. Let's go. Sorry, I'm reading Twitch chat.
That's what we're here for. It's good. Bring them in. Bring in the questions.
It's not that simple. But our servers are a challenge. But like the 0.6 second tick has always been a challenge. You know what I mean? To get a reactive feeling ability based combat system with 0.6 seconds, that's always been a challenge.
Yeah,
I think for
us,
us,
we work around it.
Yeah, I think for us, I think Mage is going to be a big challenge. I think we need to actually follow up on what we've been saying over so many years.
Ramen, Orion, anything to add to that, or pretty much same?
I mean, we kind of echoed it in a lot of what we've answered sort of previously. The biggest challenge is matching player power, giving players that content. And Orion covered it really well. Like we would love the time to sort of just sit down. Okay, what do we need? What do we need to fix? What do we need to balance? What do we need to take away from the players? Because that is something that has to be considered. As much as players don't like having their toys taken away, it's part of the greater overall picture of balancing a game. But you've also kind of got to give them something. Okay, cool, we've taken away this, but we also fix this. It's just tuning, tweaking, working out what to do. I think that's the biggest challenge. But that's what you get with a game where you don't have stat squishes. A lot of other MMOs sort of work in expansions where they say, cool, all the gear that you got through this expansion, because we're moving on to the next expansion, it's now trash. We don't do that. We're a sandbox MMO, so you've always got to be thinking, shit, like if we release this, that might make this irrelevant, or if we release this, that might make that irrelevant. I think something we've done sort of wrong in the past is everything needs to be relevant. No, let Bandos die. Just let him die, as in Grador. But no, like Invention then sort of came along. Like here you go, like this stuff is all good and new again. I personally am of the opinion that old content doesn't need to be relevant. Like corp sigils, they're not, you know, the most useful thing in the game, and they have their little place. I don't think we should ever need to go back and go, you know, these are dead. What's going on? Why aren't they moving? Like, let's just leave them, let them die.
I just want to jump in for those talking about Ricochet in the chat. We talked about that earlier and just touched on it lightly that we're aware, and it's something that we're thinking about, but we don't have anything to share. So I see you all asking it and trying to get an answer. You may have missed it at the start of the stream. We did touch on it as part of talking about the kind of abilities introduced with Raksha. I'm just going to move us on to something that I think is probably all top of our minds, or at least it definitely is mine over the past week. You talked a little bit about earlier with Celebration of Combat. Obviously, one of the awesome things in that was no death costs, and it, you know, really ignited, I think, the discussion around death costs and those for and those against. Just wanted to ask what your current thoughts are on death costs. What did you think of the reaction? Would it be something we'd ever change? If so, why? If not, why? Just, you know, let me know your thoughts.
You can take this. Bye.
Yeah.
Oh, yours.
I want that meme. Like, the cost of death is too damn high. So I did get some analytics back, and I kind of got back what I was thinking, in that in a general case, if you're doing PVM, you're making profit, even if you die. But that is a very generalized system. And we're still not happy with that answer. So you'll be happy to know that even though we've kind of got back, you're still making profit. What, you stop complaining? We're still not happy with it, right? So because it doesn't take into account things like when you're learning a boss, you die a lot, and that's compound, and that's a really negative feeling during. So do we do something with like consecutive deaths? We also, like, it averages everything. So say you've got, let's go for one of the higher death costs, like a 20 mil death cost, right? On average, you will make that 20 mil back easy. As a PVMer, you'll make that a competent PVMer, and especially one that's running a 20 mil setup, you'll get that back. However, that 20 mil loss takes a while to get back because of the way in which we balance our drops, right? Because the PogChamp drops are rare. We also need to take into account the consumables cost as well, of that you put into there. So it, like, there's some extra questions there, and the feel bad. So we do still want to address this, and we do feel that, especially at the top ends, that the cost of deaths are too high. So we do want to lower it. It's just we're still in discussions about the best place to lower it and the best way to go about it. And if we do something like a hard cap or a soft cap, where that comes into play. But I feel that the past week has given us a lot of good information in terms of why it's a good thing. It's helped us kind of make that more of a soft argument rather than like a purely data-driven argument of, well, this is really bad. Like, does anyone else want to elaborate? Because that's kind of where we are. I feel we are as a council right now, and that we still want to make a difference. It's just we still need to answer where in the world that should fit.
I think your last point was solid and is one of the stronger points for me. I think sometimes it's really difficult to take something away from a bunch of numbers, thrust it in front of you, and what we got there was concrete proof that players engage more with PVM, then they become more motivated or less disenfranchised with the whole onboarding process, learning how to kill Rax, Telos, etc. without death costs, getting more experimental, doing crazy things. Like, we have that evidence now that we can say, hey, look, we can make changes to this without breaking the entire like economy. It's fine. So yeah, it's cool. One thing I won't forget for a long time is being in a combat council meeting and then just telling everyone that, oh, by the way, I'm reducing death costs, and they were like, what? Like, what? When?
You didn't tell us about PVM week, by the way. It's like, oh yeah, next week deaths are going to be free, and I'm like, so I was in conversations with someone in analytics. This would have been really good to tell them that this was happening. I told them the day before it was happening, but yeah.
But like that, so you know, Hooli mentioned at the start of the stream about communication, and like some of that is my fault. Like we had different effects planned, and then it's like, oh, we can't do this because of engine limitations and stuff. So it's like, oh crap, like do a U-turn on the design really fast and communicate that terribly to the community team. Like double mini games currency was an example. There's a couple there that aren't double. Like it's just nitpicky little things that I could have been better at communicating. I told the combat council that, oh, you know, there's going to be an Elder Overload golem that gives them an hour buff, and it's like, all right, cool, yeah, I want to bring those little guys back. I love them.
I feel like this is setting a dangerous precedent of Orion going on a rampage.
But just to briefly touch on the celebration of combat, like it was so awesome to see people who, you know, little old Timmy with his 90 strength, he's back, right? But he's trying out that giant mole. And he's using an Elder Overload, he's trying out giant mole, he's dying over and over, even though he had like a 300k death cost beforehand. Like he's trying out new content, and the amount of, you know, friends we have that were trying out new things, being experimental. It was just an awesome week of PVM, and seeing people get dropped, seeing people learn new things, clearly showed us a lot. And I think we'll take that sort of knowledge going forward. Yeah, that kind of wraps up Celebration of Combat. I realised we got like, we've
got about 20 minutes. I am going to go onto some of the questions we have. Hopefully for a lot of you, we've tried to, like, the first topics what we wanted to make sure 100% we got on top of. We tried to kind of make them the bigger questions that we were seeing over and over again. Now we're going to kind of get more into the weeds, a bit more into the details. So hopefully that hit a lot of the big ones, and we'll do as many as we can in the next 20 minutes. Not speed round wise though. You can still go into detail. Don't worry. We'll give good answers. I think we talked about power creep already. Is there anything else you wanna say on power creep, or do you think we've said everything we could really say on power creep?
I'm happy with
personally, that. I feel like we've touched, you know, we've said players have a lot of power, players know how to utilize the game to the best of their advantage. Like, look at the stuff that Evil Lucario does. Like, they know the game inside and out. They know how to manipulate ticks. They know how to, you know, cancel, stall, all this crazy stuff. That's fine. But you've got a lot of power, and we need to match that in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I don't think we need to match Evil Lucario, otherwise we're going to...
No.
No one but Evil Lucario is going to play in the game. But yeah, we need to ask.
Yeah, like someone did rightly say in the Twitch chat, look, we are not him, and no. But power creep is still the same for everyone, right? Players have a lot of power. Players have access to that power. It's not something we need to address.
Mm-hmm. This is where... Go on, finish that.
No,
I'm going to tangent, so you finish your point. I'm going to tangent to something else.
Well, okay. We briefly discussed like scaling upwards, scaling downwards, and that gives everyone accessibility. That's the dream. So, all you.
Thank you. Yeah, more people doing PVM, the better, in my opinion. Again, server dependent. So I saw a question from Evil Lucario actually in the chat. I just thought I'd address it straight away. It was, when are the elite dungeons changing? When are the elite dungeon changes coming? So we have a big list. Some of them are done, some of them are not. This is one of the examples that I spoke about earlier, where we just kind of do them when we can, and then we release them as a batch. Some we release like straight away, and some we don't. This is something that's better off done in a batch, so they can be batch tested and therefore more efficiently QA'd. Yeah. So I will say that Mod Sponge, who has recently switched from the QA lane to the content development lane, we welcome him with open arms. He did exactly that as part of his training. We combined the Elite Dungeon Lucky Charms into one and handled all of the presets and stuff on login to sort that out for you. So that is done. Whether it's being released soon is a question I can't answer, but it's likely after my current project I will hopefully be able to do some more things on Elite Dungeons and do another like Mod Pi advent calendar style, release some Elite Dungeon changes. There's a few really impactful ones on the list, and the changes to the Elite Dungeon system as well, that if we were to go ahead and make further Elite Dungeons, it would make them even better. So yeah, that's done. Can't tell when they're coming, unfortunately.
As we're
Wait, what's the
snapping up
ramen? Fingers are coming in.
Yeah, sorry. As the person spamming about Vorago, we did a lot of Vorago over the course of the Christmas holidays. We've said this on Twitter, so it's okay to say it here. We are definitely looking into sort of shortening a lot of the length of Vorago, similar to how we did a little change with Araxor's Part 3. Don't have an ETA, don't have anything like we can say about it. The only thing we can say is we're looking at it.
It's on the list, right?
It's on a list, but there's no promise, there's no ETA. So just you're spamming it. So hopefully I fix your Control V. Cool.
Thoughts on the place of switchscape in PVM, and obviously it's something that's a big part of PVM. Thoughts on it?
We actually all disagree here, don't we?
Yeah. The contrast of opinion is quite prevalent in the combat council.
But this is the reason for the council, right? Like, we are all allowed to disagree, because for me, I like switchscape as a reinforcement of the thing that makes RuneScape combat special, in that you can be everything. We always balance it such that you do not need switchscape to complete anything, but obviously the mentality of a RuneScape player is I must be the best at everything all the time. So switchscape mentally becomes this necessity, but like I liked the fact that players can flex using switchscape, and I think provided it's always flex, I'm actually very happy with it, because it is a unique thing about RuneScape. However, Mr. Onion over here,
that's just rude. Yeah, so I'm not a fan of switchscape for, let's say, 90% of its implementation or 90% of its interactions with the game. There are some exceptions, and one of those exceptions you mentioned, it's like it's doing something in a bit more skilled manner. I'm completely fine with that, but unfortunately there are some occasions where switchscape becomes the meta in order to accomplish something extraordinary. So for example, if we add in an achievement, well, yeah, that's cool, you can't get it without switchscape unless power creep catches you up at the baseline. There's also the issue of it working dysfunctionally with things in the game, like stalling. So there's a few things. I'm not a fan of switchscape for the majority of its uses. I'm not a fan of stalling for the majority of its uses. I think that these are hidden skill shots in the game that the game never teaches you. You don't know these things. The community teaches you these things. Videos on YouTube teach you these things. Switchscape in its most basic essence of, oh hey, that monster is now praying magic, I'm going to switch to my ranged weapon. That's fine. That's great. That's gameplay I can get behind, and I like that. But there's all of these weird edge cases where you could stall like 5 different attacks because of switchscape and stuff like that, where I'd rather just eradicate that from the game completely. That's where we take skill ceiling to like the heavens, and that's just not really fair. Like, I like a decent skill curve. I don't like this like weird. Our skill curve, because of switchscape and 4-ticking, is like lumpy and bumpy, and then really, really high end. I would prefer this nice smooth learning curve, and we just have a number of different issues there. Is it a major problem? No. Is it something that I'd like to iron out? Yeah, sure.
Well, like you said, that's the point of having a group of people, right, where you all have different views and different thoughts, and it kind of creates a force of people rather than, one person's take, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say anything about yours, Orion. I'm just saying, it's a benefit of having a council, right?
Chat. Something in the chat made me laugh, like mod opinion or something like that, which made me laugh. So whoever said that, thanks.
To be honest, there is a question later about the skill curve, right? So should we just answer that now? Like,
yeah, just keep going. Yeah, just keep talking about it.
Yeah. So like, I agree with you there. To be honest with you, like, I don't like once you get past a certain point. The best way for you to learn combat is to go on the PVM Encyclopedia and start reading the guides. The second shout. Hey, those guys do an amazing job, and I'm not gonna.
Yes, they do.
I'm gonna name drop them, so I don't care. But like, even we go to the PVM encyclopedia in places to kind of go, oh, what's the current meta for this? You know what I mean?
I just go to Learn Combat because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you just type it into Google, right? But but like our in-game onboarding is not where we want it, especially for like end game. It's part of the reasons why we don't like full-tick auto-attacking, right? Because the in-game onboarding to that sort of thing isn't good. And things like stalling to stack things. Like we either need to make it something established or we need to deal with it. I'm not going to say we're going to change it because I'm not going to commit to that on the live stream. Let's be honest. But no, like
there is only so much we can teach you in-game, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying there should be like the extended combat academy lessons to teach you how to do these things. But I do think we could do stuff to better telegraph them.
Sure.
I think is a better way to put it.
Cool. Okay, what are your thoughts on these ideas for future and Wars Cry Life? This is a question that came in. Ring of Vigor Anachronia style stand.
Where does it end? Once you put one ring on a stand, right? Like, cool. Like,
Can I put Ring of Death on that stand?
It's a nice idea, right? But we do this, and we say, cool, you can have this ring on a stand, and then the same player comes back and he's like, hello, I want my Ring of Death on a stand. And it's like, okay, we give you this, and then they're like, back. What about my Asylum Surgeon? Cool.
But
it's
Mod
a nice
Ramen.
idea.
Like, we have 10 fingers. Why can't I wear 10 different rings?
You do have 10 fingers. Stuff like this is where archaeology I think does a fantastic job, where you can sort of turn these items into buffs through the relic system. Now, I don't think we have time to touch on the relic system. Maybe we're touching on it in a bit. But like, it's a nice buff. I understand it is kind of like the Ring of Vigor is a quality of life. It does contribute to switchscape. But like, where does it end? Once we give you one thing, you'll be back asking for the next. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds for the Ring of Vigor and Anachronia? Who knows?
I'm conscious
I
of
just
time.
saw a great joke. I'm going to ignore it because it's somewhat crude, so carry on, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to get as many of your questions in as possible, and we like to go in depth for answers. We're all chatty.
We can quick fire.
Yeah, we'll quick. And the other two suggestions were a weekly chrono cost to allow free relic switching instead of per switch.
Sorry, I wasn't
That's
listening.
not really up to us, man. That's not really up to us.
Here's the thing: the balancing of relics is more down to the design of archaeology and the core design of archaeology. We do hear you though. We do like echo it in the direction of the people who can make those decisions. That you know, I've got my skilling relic set up. I've got my combat relic set up. I've got my treasure trail relic set up, and like I don't really dedicate this month. I'll be doing this. You kind of switch quite a lot, and like the archaeology team. There isn't a team, but the people that worked on archaeology are aware of that and would like to do some quality of life. What shape that comes along has to kind of be thought out well, because obviously crow notes are the lifeblood of archaeology, and the relics are so powerful because you can only have 3 and there's a cost attached to them. So they've got to take that into account. But yeah, like, we can't say a simple yes no, because that's just not it's not where we have control over, I suppose.
Do we think it would be better to make more small adjustments more quickly instead of making kind of bigger changes or big group changes? I think you touched on a little bit of the reasoning why behind this, Jay, but anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah. I'll expand. I mean, I guess you split the changes up into 2 categories, right? You have fixes that can be quite important and impactful immediately, and you want to get them out as soon as possible. And then you have quality of life changes, such as the Elite Dungeon one mentioned earlier, such as ModPie's combat fixes earlier. And I use the word fix there, but a lot of them are essentially quality of life additions to the game. Those are more impactful, released in batches, and simpler for us to release. It has to go through the whole pipeline. It has to be designed, implemented, tested, and then put into a release candidate, tested with everything in live, and then released. But when it comes to standalone bug fixes, like, I don't know, Vorago or changing Greater Ricochet or something like that, where it's like that's imbalanced, we'll call it a bug and then send it out. We can do those as soon as, and you see a lot of them in patch notes throughout the months of the year where we've just done them that month and they got released.
Cool. All right, Quickfire continues. Thoughts on a Staff of Sliske spec buff?
At the time, Magic was the strongest attack style by far. It does sit in a pretty strange place now, especially compared to the other two. I did touch on special attacks earlier when we were discussing EOF, so who knows? Got ideas, but nothing guaranteed. Haven't even thought about putting anything into a dev environment. We hear, the constant buff SOS. That's all we can really give on that.
Cool. Lately, obviously, we were talking about this earlier, actually, about mixing kind of more lore and integrating more lore and story into kind of the combat stuff that's been coming out more recently. And the person who asked this question said it was wholeheartedly welcome, and asked, will you do more with previous bosses' lore? For example, Araxi, Telos, Cal fights, etc.
I think our time's better spent making new content than trying to focus on the old stuff, and especially when it comes to injecting lore. Like, to be honest, quite often we'll go back to those old things and go, oh, we could make a really cool quest based on this because there's all this really nice setting. So, but that again is new content. Do you know what I mean? I think that's the best place for it. I don't think going back and injecting lore into old content really gives this an appropriate amount of value for the time that would need to be invested.
Yeah, I personally prefer the reverse approach of bringing the old characters into new lore, if possible. It makes them a bit more relevant and such. We had the Araxi quest planned in Game Jam that had some work done on it, and I think it was fully fleshed out design-wise and narrative-wise. But because that's a Game Jam project, that gets postponed for the current roadmap. Because it just doesn't quite fit into the story plan that we have with Elder God Wars Dungeon and such coming up. But I don't see any problem with having a Colossi quest or a Anima Guardian quest that involves Solak, Vorago, Telos, etc. Something like that in the future would be really interesting. And then what you do is retroactively expand on those characters' lore by releasing new content. You don't have to address that as a problem. You just bring them in. That's my thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah, my take is very. I'll keep it quick. My take is very similar. Yes, make future bosses lore heavy, future combat lore heavy. But looking back, just a cow fight is a big cow fight king and cow fight queen. They're just big cow fights. They don't need to have interacted with some thing to become this powerful. It's just a big bug, and that's fine.
Buggy content.
We had this one a few times as well, and I know it's been dropped on some previous combat streams before. Currently, there's a noticeable FPS drop when you spellbook swap. Is there any chance for some sort of omni-spellbook to solve this, so spellbook swap is no longer required, or any other solution?
Spellbook swap's been fixed. Mod Hunter came along, saw it on my list, and went squish. So there's a fix waiting to go out. So spellbook swap.
I think you just made some people stay.
Yeah, as far as an omni spellbook, again, that's a weird one, right? Because the spellbook you choose is meant to be a decision you make. It's part of your loadout. So I don't think we'll do. I say this is me saying it, not that it wouldn't happen, but I don't think right now an omni spellbook is on the cards, because we like the fact that you have to make these decisions, and spellbook swap is a big, tick box in your progression.
Omni Spellbook is just another huge power creep. It's another accessibility creep. It's another tool creep. Yeah, we have those limitations in place for a reason.
So for those of you, we are almost pretty much out of time. So I'm going to turn over to you, Combat Council. Are there any questions still in our list that you want to tackle? I'm going to let you pick the final few. So make your decisions and pick out the ones you'd like to tackle, because I think you will know what the best answers are.
All right, let me reel off 3. Do you think we'll ever see solo Solak? No. Whilst it is something I did previously consider, I think MMOs do need group-only content. Solak scales from 2 to 7, so that's fine. Are there any plans for combat achievement diaries? Probably not diaries, but definitely more combat feats and achievements in the future. Yes, they are engaging, so that's awesome. And then the last one I'll pick is... will dual-wield weapons get a special attack, and will there be any changes to weapons with special attacks that don't seem very useful? Special attacks certainly have a place within our combat system again. They were so crucial pre-OC, and it's good to see them thrive again, as I touched upon earlier. Whilst I don't think we'll go back and retroactively add special attacks to things like Ascension bows or Blightbounds or other dual wields like Prey Soul, it's definitely something we'll consider going forward when we release more dual wields, especially with Essence of Finality. That's my 3. Take it away, guys.
Cool.
I'll take one from the chat. Oh, for God's sake.
Go ahead, mate.
Go ahead. When are the mod pie fix is going to be released? There is a tentative date. I can't tell you this date because dates can be missed, and I'm not going to promise you anything. But it's looking good for Q1. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's what we said in the least Q&A as well.
Yeah.
27.
It just came up an awful lot.
Anything, Orion, that you want to touch on before we go?
Yeah, there's a couple quickly. Has there been any thought in just lowering the damage done by players or raising boss HP to better deal with power creep in the game? No, because that's not really how we would do it. There are other ways of dealing with power creep and other ways of dealing with bosses that can effectively be DPS dummies without introducing hard like time caps and stuff like that. So I'll leave it there, but there are definitely other ways to alleviate power creep, and we'll look at using those instead. And someone asked, are there any plans to add decimals to adrenaline? Adrenaline is calculated in our code as decimals to one significant figure, so there's no reason why we couldn't just display that to the player as well. Like, we have effects that, you know, give you back 0.5% adren, so yeah, we could easily show that. I mean, it's a good suggestion, one that I didn't even think about, to be honest. Yeah, that's me.
Cool. Apologies for the brief wrap up. I know we'd all want to keep talking, but our production team are in the studio at Jagex, and there's a strict cut off, so we don't want to get them in any trouble. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for taking out the time to have this chat. I hope we can do it again soon, and I hope everyone watching loved this as well. If you're looking for more kind of deep dive content, we did lore yesterday with Mod JD. And it was really awesome. 2 hours of kind of various members of the team. I think it was 7 different J mods diving into lore, kind of more recent and in the past. Also, for those of you asking about some of the crashes that you've been experiencing recently, we just managed to deploy an update that addresses the Castle Wars crashing. So initial signs look good. But just know that if you were talking about that in chat at the start, that will hopefully adjust, and we're aware, and we're looking into any of the other crashes, but this should be the vast majority of them addressed. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this dive into combat, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.